When power goes unchecked for too long, it only takes one mistake to bring it all crashing down. It started like any other shift for Officer Jonathan Blake. Another sweltering afternoon in Montgomery, Alabama. Another routine patrol down Jefferson Davis Parkway. The sun hung high, heat waves rippling off the cracked asphalt as he sipped lukewarm coffee from a corner gas station. Half watching the road, half daydreaming about his upcoming fishing trip, he almost missed it. A black 2015 BMW 535i cruised through an intersection. The light, in Blake's eyes, was far too close to red. His fingers moved on instinct, flipping on the patrol car's lights. The siren gave a sharp chirp, prompting the BMW to glide smoothly to the shoulder. No saben moves. No hesitation. If anything, the driver seemed entirely unfazed. Blake adjusted his duty belt and stepped out, carrying the same rigid authority he wielded every day. He performed this routine 1,000 times. This was just another stop. But the moment he approached the driver's side window, something about the man behind the wheel rubbed him the wrong way. The driver was a black man, early 60s by the look of him. Clean-shaven, sharp-eyed, his posture upright, even while seated. He wore a crisp, short-sleeved, button-down shirt. Nothing flashy. Everything about him was composed, controlled. Blake didn't like it. License and registration, Blake ordered, keeping his tone clipped and firm. The man didn't reach for his documents right away. Instead, he looked up, meeting Blake's gaze with an unflinching calm that made the officer's grip tighten around his belt. "May I ask why I was pulled over, officer?" The man's tone wasn't confrontational, just deliberate. Blake exhaled sharply through his nose. He hated when they asked, hated when they didn't just do what they were told. "You ran a red light," Blake said flatly. The man's brow lifted slightly. He glanced at his rearview mirror at the intersection behind him before turning back. "That light was yellow when I crossed it," he replied evenly. "I'm certain of it." Blake's jaw clenched. He had no dash cam recording to back him up, not that it mattered. His word was law out here. "License. Registration," Blake repeated, his patience thinning. This time, the man gave a slow nod and reached into his glove box. His movements were smooth. No fumbling. No unnecessary motions. He handed over the documents without another word. Blake glanced at the license. Leonard Caldwell. The name meant nothing to him. But something about the way Caldwell conducted himself made Blake's skin crawl. He wasn't scared. That bothered him. "Step out of the car," Blake ordered. Caldwell's expression barely changed. Just a faint frown. "May I ask why?" "Because I said so." There was a pause. Brief, but enough for Blake to sense a shift. Caldwell held his gaze a moment longer than most men dared, then sighed. Not with fear, but with something else. Quiet understanding. "All right," Caldwell said, his voice steady. He opened the door and stepped out with a practiced ease, unfolding his tall frame as if he'd done this before. Blake gestured him toward the rear of the vehicle. "Hands on the trunk." Caldwell complied. Blake began the pat-down, his movements terse, methodical. As he worked, Caldwell muttered, "This is unnecessary." Blake's jaw tightened. "Excuse me. You have my ID. You ran my plates. You know I'm clean." Blake didn't answer. He finished the pat-down and stepped back. Without warning, he reached for his handcuffs. Caldwell stiffened. "What are you doing?" "Turn around," Blake barked. "For what?" Caldwell asked. "I said turn around." But this time, Caldwell didn't move. And that was when Blake made the worst decision of his career. He grabbed Caldwell's arm. The air changed instantly. Before Blake could snap the cuffs on, Caldwell turned. Fast. Controlled. Suddenly, Blake wasn't holding an older man's wrist. He was gripping the wrist of someone who had been trained to break holds like this 1,000 times before. For the first time that day, Officer Jonathan Blake felt a sting of doubt. But he didn't let go. He couldn't. For a moment, there was silence. Blake's grip tightened. Caldwell didn't resist, didn't pull away, didn't fight. He stood there, calm and deliberate. That only made Blake angrier. "I said turn around," Blake snapped, yanking his arm. Caldwell exhaled through his nose, slow and steady. Then, in a voice devoid of fear, he said, "Officer, I strongly suggest you think carefully about what you're doing." Blake's blood boiled. "Think carefully," he repeated with a bitter laugh. "You're refusing to comply. That's resisting." Caldwell's eyes narrowed, sharp as steel. "I'm not resisting. I'm questioning an unlawful detainment." But Blake didn't care. His pride was already bruised. He needed control of the situation. Without another word, he twisted Caldwell's arm behind his back and slammed him against the trunk of the BMW. Hard. Caldwell grunted as Blake jammed his forearm between his shoulder blades and ratcheted the cuffs tight around his wrists. "You're under arrest," Blake declared. "For what?" Caldwell asked, his voice maddeningly calm. Blake hesitated. He hadn't thought that far ahead. "Obstruction," he blurted out. "Interfering with an officer's investigation." Caldwell sighed, shaking his head slowly. Not in fear, in disappointment. Blake ignored the look. He grabbed his shoulder mic. "Dispatch, this is Officer Blake. I've got a male suspect in custody, requesting transport." 10-4, came the reply. "What's the charge?" Before Blake could answer, Caldwell spoke first. "This is a mistake, officer," he said quietly. "And it's one you're going to regret." Blake let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Is that so?" Caldwell didn't curse, didn't raise his voice. He simply turned his head slightly. "You don't know who I am, do you?" Blake sneered. "Should I?" Caldwell met his gaze through the rear window of the cruiser, then leaned back, settling into the seat with unsettling ease. Like a man who already knew exactly how things were going to play out. Blake shoved the door closed harder than he needed to. Blake sat at his desk, scrolling through his phone while Caldwell was processed. Just another day. Just another arrest. No big deal. Then his sergeant's voice cut through the air like a siren. "Blake, in my office. Now." Blake stood, confused but calm, and walked into the glass-walled room. Sergeant Dennis McCullough stood behind his desk, his jaw tight. He slammed the phone down. "You want to tell me why I have a U.S. Army colonel in my holding cell?" Blake blinked. "And what?" "Colonel Leonard Caldwell, MC Kuluk Snaped. 35-year veteran. 2 tours in Iraq. Security clearance at the Pentagon. And a personal contact with the Secretary of Defense." Blake felt the blood drain from his face. I didn't know." "No, you didn't," McCullough growled. "Because you didn't bother to look at his damn ID before you decided to throw your weight around." Blake stammered. He wasn't cooperating. He knew his rights, McCullough barked. "And you didn't like it." Blake clenched his fists. "What now?" "We're just letting him go." McCullough gave a bitter chuckle. "Letting him go?" "No, Blake. We're opening a full internal review. Every traffic stop you've made in the past year." He shoved a folder into Blake's chest. "You better hope to God this is the first time you've pulled something like this." Blake's stomach churned. "Sergeant, out of my office." Caldwell sat in the holding cell, calm as ever. He had made one phone call. That was all it took. Now he waited. An hour later, 3 men in dark suits arrived. Military. Professional. One nodded. "Colonel, you're free to go." Caldwell stood, offering a faint smile. "That was quick." "You have friends," the man replied, "and a long history." As they escorted Caldwell out, he glanced across the squad room. Blake stood frozen by the lockers, his face pale. Caldwell didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The damage was already done. The fallout came fast. Body cam footage of the arrest surfaced online. News outlets ran the story nonstop. Politicians weighed in. Military officials expressed outrage. Civil rights groups mobilized. And Blake? Blake was placed on unpaid leave. An internal investigator named Olivia Chun was assigned to his case. Young, sharp, uncompromising. "Your stops target black men 80% of the time," Chun said flatly during their interview. "Care to explain that?" Blake crossed his arms. "I stopped suspicious vehicles." Chun slid a report across the table. 15% of those stops resulted in citations. 90% of the people you let go were white. Blake didn't respond. "Patterns matter, officer," Chun said. "One mistake is an accident. A pattern? That's a choice." Days later, Blake resigned. No charges were filed, but he was finished. His career ended with a single line in the Montgomery Daily. Officer Jonathan Blake resigns following controversial arrest of Colonel Leonard Caldwell. Caldwell, meanwhile, stood at a podium days later. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's about accountability." And this time someone listened.